Welcome back to Naturalista. Well, guys, today we have a hell of a show. Today with Dr. Juliano Calil. He's a senior fellow at the Center for the Blue Economy. Dr. Calil specializes in climate action and uses immersive tools like virtual reality to inspire awareness and change. He's also delivered a compelling TEDx talk where he explained these ideas in detail, shedding light on innovative ways to address the climate crisis and how we can prepare for disasters like wildfires while working to protect our planet. Let's welcome Dr. Calil to the show.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for being here.
It's such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
We're so excited to have you because this is something that's happening now. It's live. It's something that is affecting many people. And we want to bring in the fact that we can make a change. Right?
Right.
We can make a change. We can adjust our lives to better benefit the planet, right? So let me ask you a question. What inspired your transition from a career in technology to addressing climate change?
Oh, yeah, thank you. So I used to work in technology. I was designing decision support systems and database for big corporations. And I think it was around 2007, 2008, I had a mild burnout, and I was looking for more purpose, I guess. So I decided I quit my job, went back to school and pursue a master's in environmental science and management. And then after a couple of years in a master's, I never want to work again. This is great. I want to be in school forever. So I went on to pursue a PhD in ocean sciences at UC Santa Cruz.
Very interesting.
And towards the end of the program, we had these lectures and we had guest scientists coming in and talking about their great research related to climate. And I was sitting in the back and then not always being able to follow what they were saying. So I went through this imposter syndrome kind of phase. But then I started asking my colleagues, like, hey, are you getting some of this? And they were having the same kind of problems. So this kind of concept of, well, how can we improve the way we communicate science and some of these complex issues for people that don't have a master's, don't have a PhD, or don't have that background so they can understand. Right?
Simple terms.
Simple terms and relatable, and yes, so that's kind of where Virtual Planet started from that.
What inspired you to create something like Virtual Planet?
So the idea is that how can we use immersive storytelling to inspire people to act, right? There's a lot of great research coming out from neuroscience and psychology that are saying, you know, if throwing issues and facts at people would work, we wouldn't have the problems that we have today. Right? So
Correct.
that does not work. So the way to get people to act is through storytelling. So the idea, if you have a story with a positive outcome, a relatable character, someone that you can see yourself as, or you can relate to them, and with simple actions. So someone did something that led to a positive outcome. So let's say, you know, I met you, we had a great conversation,
Correct.
I learned from your background, you learned from mine. So anyone can do that, right? It's not, I can't solve the climate crisis, it's too big. So how do we break this down into small actions that people can take? And there's also a great researcher in the UK, his name is Chris DiMeo, but he's proposing, and his research comes from cognitive dissonance theory. Just fascinating. We think that if we educate people, we give them all the information, then they will go and act and do, you know, the right thing. And it turns out it's the opposite. It's our actions actually inform our beliefs. So if you get someone to act or to do that simple action, positive outcome, something that they feel good about, they're more likely to do that again. So that engagement increases as well, right?
That makes
so you
sense.
create that feedback loop that all of a sudden there's this self-persuasion process that we go through that helps. And then you're like, oh, I did that because because the climate's changing, or because hurricanes are becoming more infrequent,
Or it affected you.
Wildfires are a bigger risk. So now you convince yourself. So that's kind of turning it on its head, right? So we try to bring all that science. I love science and research and teaching. So we try to bring that into the storytelling that we use, and that we create, and then we work with cities, NGOs, universities to deploy this content on the ground. It's super important, right? Otherwise, it's just entertainment.
Correct.
So you watch, we have a great experience in West Palm Beach that we developed recently, looking at what can we do to reduce the risks from hurricane storm surge. And then I think more than 500 people tried it in VR. So we have all these events, and we have a little research. So we're collecting data. And yeah, so it's
That is amazing. So this project in West Palm Beach, right? So you connected with over 500 people through VR.
Yes.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and we're collecting data with Florida Atlantic University. We have a team that they're going through, and there's a questionnaire that you go through. And one of the great things that we're finding is like, people that saw some of the solutions in virtual reality, they thought they would be more effective than the group that saw the same images on a tablet. So there's also that. Yeah, it's very impactful. It hits you in a different way. I don't know. Have you tried virtual reality recently?
Not with something like this, but I have tried VR, and it's very entertaining. And you feel like you're immersing yourself in the information. The data comes in differently than it does on a video or something.
Yeah, and that's why we're talking about storytelling, and why storytelling in VR, right? Because if you put the headset on, it takes you like 5 seconds, and you forget where you are. You're not at the library, you're not at home, all of a sudden you're in that virtual environment.
So it's basically like a simulation environment that's created.
Physically, what's the great thing is, like, physiologically, what your body thinks that what you're seeing is real. Even though your brain doesn't know that, but you react physiologically as if you're afraid of heights. People, there's some experiences where you have to go on a plank, or I can't do that. Because even though I could just step to the side and I'll be safe, but my body doesn't understand that, right? So it taps to the parts of the brain that are activated when you're seeing that thing's actually happening to you. So it's a different way of connecting emotionally with the subject and with the topic, right? Because talking about climate is complicated.
It is.
It fires in California,
it's
and
in
California we're thinking, oh, it's hurricanes in Florida, right?
It's Florida.
Like, it's not this. Right? If we just keep reinforcing the issues and the problems, then we're just going to keep
solutions.
Yeah.
So we're looking for solutions through the AR environment. It kind of, like you said, you're immersed in it. So now you might have a different, complete mental attitude about what's happening.
Yeah, and at the end of the experience, we kind of on purpose put a call to action, right? And here's what you can do. Here's learn from your neighbors. Or this is what your neighbors are doing. Go to this website, attend this event, or read more about this. So then you have something that you can act on. And then it goes back to the storytelling and the actions informing beliefs. So now if you show up for a meeting, you meet some people, you learn a little bit, you tell your friends, and then they might show up for the next meeting. And if you feel good about it, then you show up, and so that engagement level increases as well.
And it makes connections.
Exactly.
It creates a connection, and those connections create a group of people now that are kind of putting out the same data, and people are just picking it up and absorbing it. Now, what ages do you think would benefit more from this AR environment?
So that's super interesting, because we worked on a class for middle school students in California, focused on marine protected areas. So this is like national parks in the ocean, right? So it's for 13 and older. I think that's a good kind of cutoff age for educational and some of the other content. But they go through there's a class about 8 minutes.
I'm energy. When two energies connect and they have the same goal in mind, it kind of creates more interest in speaking to other people about it.
Yeah, and then it's bigger than the sum of our energies, right?
So it's really the energy keeps expanding and expanding.
Absolutely.
And hopefully it would be for something to help avoid these things, or help us understand what we need to do to avoid them.
And then on that project in California for the kids, they go through a series of activities. And now, again, I love research, so I can't pass an opportunity to collect data. But our team, we work with a great local nonprofit that's called Save Our Shores. So they have 30 VR headsets. They go through the schools, and then they deliver the class. And at the end, there's this activity that the students do. And they interviewed over 300 students, all middle school, right? So what they're finding is that 90% of the students, after they go through the VR, they're like, oh, I can't wait to tell my parents, my friends. So they're kind of getting the word out.
Create
right?
the link, yes.
Half of the students could remember 5 species inside the marine protected area.
Amazing.
Right? So the knowledge retention, because in VR there's this thing too where it's full body learning, right? We just don't learn from our ears or visual or all of that. It's a combination. And if you're immersed and if you're moving while you're learning something, you remember it more. It's fascinating.
Wow, I never
right?
thought of that. That's amazing.
There's some great research from Stanford showing that, where they have an experience where you move around and they measure the people that moved more in the VR actually retain more knowledge. It was a sort of statistic. I can't go away without telling that. Like 20% of the students, which is about 50 plus students, wrote letters to their state senators.
That is
advocating for MPA, say, hey, we like this, you need to protect these areas and do more of them. So all of a sudden, I imagine the senators getting like 50 letters from kids saying, hey, good job, or keep doing this, right? So that advocacy too, right? So the impact kind of propagates, which is great.
That is amazing. And it just creates another group that might talk to another group. And kind of put the information or send the information around to create more knowledge.
Absolutely.
And that's amazing. How does virtual reality help people understand and engage with climate issues?
I think that idea of really the way it hits you at a kind of a physiological level. So you're seeing, maybe you're looking at a model and you see the storm surge coming through your area, right?
We've seen that.
Right, or a wildfire going through the region, right?
Yes.
So the way that I think virtual reality has this power of providing you or putting you in that environment in a safe way. Right? You don't need to actually burn your neighborhood to understand what that is, because that's very traumatic, right? So we worked on a project with the town of Paradise in California and the Nature Conservancy, where we kind of recreated the campfire, which is one up to now. We're still waiting to see what's going to happen with these fires in Los Angeles now, but that was the most devastating fire in the state. More than 80 people died. It was a tragedy. And
Unbelievable.
So we talked to the director of Parks and Recreation there and some of our colleagues, and they asked us, hey, can you recreate the fire in the forest? And I was very reluctant. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. What's the point? But they convinced me. What he said was like, well, we want to take this to our senators, state senators, and the government to show them, because if you haven't seen or experienced this, you can't imagine it. Now, with all the footage that we're seeing, maybe it's a little more relatable, but it's like they measure the fire speed, Judith, in acres burned per second. See that kind of going by. And we have the Santa Ana winds. They blow from east to west, so they kind of bring all the hot air, really dry air from the desert areas in California to the coast. They can reach 100 miles per hour. You have these embers jumping from houses to houses, and sometimes they land 3 miles away.
In seconds.
And then another fire pops out here, another one there, so it's really hard to... So we kind of show that in a safe environment. We don't show that to people that live through that, right?
Right, of course.
We don't want to like...
Trigger the trauma.
Absolutely not. That's not the goal. This is for like planning, and so we have disclaimers. That's why we have even a psychologist on call when we have this new apps coming up. It's like, hey, how far can we take this, or is this too far? And sometimes they say, oh, you can go a little far. You pull it back a little bit. So to try to be tasteful and really focusing on solutions, right? What
Definitely.
Can we do? Yeah.
I think, here at the Naturalista, we like to focus on things that make a difference.
Right.
And we're so happy to have you here on the show. We're excited to discuss this a little further, especially that we have felt this here in the United States. And we just kind of want to understand more about how to make a change, an impact. And we thank you for being here on the show. And we're going to take a break. Come back to the Naturalista. So we're having a very interesting and honest conversation about what we can do. So how important is it to involve younger generations in climate action and make a global impact?
Yeah, I think that's key. I think there are a couple of concerns I think we need to be mindful about how we go about it, because every time I hear it's like, oh, the next generation is going to solve this, I was like, no, that's
cringing.
Like, come on. I think climate anxiety is through the roof, especially with younger people, right? So if you look at the research, it's really telling. So we have to be mindful and careful in how we engage with them. It's super important, and I think, again, I go back to, if we envision a better future, we can build it, right? Enough of the doom and gloom. We have to be mindful. We can't just brush that off, right? Things will get worse. The thing with climate change is that the extremes, they become more extreme and more frequent. So more drought, more like intense rain events, the intense hurricanes become more frequent. So
yes, the VR environment is bringing people to the center of the action of what is occurring, and maybe building new solutions from that experience.
Absolutely. And here's the good news, right? We know what we need to do.
Yes.
We know everything we got to do to solve the climate crisis and reduce the emissions and adapt, right? It's just how do we get to do it? So that's the problem that we're trying to solve. So when I get to a town or a community and say, hey, what is the problem we're dealing with? Like in West Palm Beach, right? There's like coastal erosion, there's some of the hurricanes, the surges from hurricanes. So it's like, you talk to the coastal engineer, you talk to the sustainability people, it's like, oh yeah, here's what we need to do, right?
Right.
Maybe
here's the list.
And I like this, it's a phased approach, right? Climate will have impacts for many, many decades, right? Next couple century even.
Wow.
But we don't have to do now something to prepare for the climate in 100 years, right? But maybe for the next 30, 40 years, maybe you can raise the seawalls. Maybe you can upgrade your pump station. Maybe you can do some other things. And then, like we use, I think, Peanut Island as an example.
Peanut Island, yes.
Yeah, so we say, oh, we could do one of those in front of Osprey Park. And that will have, using mangrove, working with nature. It's like in Florida, you have this amazing resource, the mangroves.
Yes, ecosystem.
Right? They attenuate wave energy, they protect from windstorms, they enhance fisheries, they filter the water. It's like a great resource. And when you plant it, you just let it go and it does its thing, right? So how can we understand what's possible and take this phased approach to reduce some of the risks? And I think getting youth excited about this.
Yes.
I have students now that are at state agencies. One of my students is leading a sea level rise plan for one of our agencies in the States. So they're very quickly going to be in positions where they will be able to make a real difference.
And
so
decisions.
I think, but we got to get them excited.
Yes.
Model of a city.
You can see Osprey Park. To your left, you can see Gettler Park. And to your right, you can see Chappelle Park.
That's pretty cool.
Parks are a great asset to the city and are enjoyed by many locals and visitors.
Huh. What city is this?
West Palm Beach.
Oh, this is West Palm Beach. That's pretty cool.
People launch kayaks and boats are cruising by. It is
Surroundings to look at. So it's actually a different experience for sure. It makes you understand it better. I think that would be the perfect way to put it. It makes you understand it a lot better. When through the simulation, the water starts rising, and you're like, we're looking at the beach, as you would when you are in a Sunday and it's sunny, and suddenly the water rising and covers everything. And we have seen it before, but not everybody has lived it.
One of my students is leading a sea level rise plan for one of our agencies in the States. So they're very quickly going to be in positions where they will be able to make a real difference.
And
so
decisions.
I think, but we got to get them excited.
Yes.
It's not like, hey, this is a huge problem. It's your problem. Go fix it.
We're
like,
going
who wants
to
to
send
hear
it
that,
over.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, no, here, and it can be exciting, right? What can you do about it? Just find your passion and find your vocation. And hopefully that will also pay your bills, right? That's important. You can just, I dream of being, sitting on a tree the whole day. That's not going to work. So you got to pay the bills. But find that and follow it. Right? For me, my passion is technology. And now more recently, storytelling and psychology. So it's like I'm always curious and learning. So how can I use that to try help solve the problem? How can we fix these things, right? And one of the things that I'm finding, we worked maybe with, maybe 20 different communities over the last 4 or 5 years. And the solutions are different. If you go for different areas, right? If you go to, even in Florida here, I had a great meeting in Hollywood, and they're looking at sand dunes or maybe seawalls, or if you go a little further up on the intracoastal, maybe you can do man-made islands or building codes or whatever it is. So I think when you talk to the locals, they will know what needs to be done.
Yes, because they're the one experiencing the
Exactly.
flooding waters
Yeah,
coming into
yeah.
their home every time we have a rain event.
Absolutely. And there are things that you can do at your home. There's things we can do at the neighborhood level.
What changes do you foresee in climate challenges over the next decades?
Yeah, so I think it's important to not downplay kind of what we're facing here, right? I think the numbers just came out. 2024 was the hottest year on record. 2023 was the second. We're shooting for that 1.5 degrees Celsius target. We just missed it, right? So it was above that, and it's likely to continue to go up. So I think with climate, there's this thing where the extremes are becoming more extreme. I think if you look at fire and rain and drought in California, right? A few years ago, we had this massive drought in California. There were some wildfires, and then we got big rainfall events. So when the vegetation died, the roots couldn't hold the soil. So the result is that we had these landslides, right, in Santa Barbara County. If you look at LA now, 2-3 years ago, we had really massive rains, so the vegetation grew. We had this really lush environment, and that was followed by a drought. So everything dried up, and you have this massive fuel. And then when you have the Santa Ana winds that blow the hot air, any little spark becomes this massive fires, right? So we'll have to deal with these more extreme events. And in one of our projects in Portland, we explored the idea of cascading impacts, right? So within 1 year, they lived through a wildfire, an ice storm, and the worst heat wave in decades.
Unbelievable.
Like within 12 months.
Unbelievable.
So you barely recovered from one of these crises, and then the next one hits you. So we'll have to be more prepared to deal with some of these challenges. And so because it's such a serious issue that we'll have to deal with, I think it's important to look for inspiration, creativity, learn to live in harmony with our environment in a better way. If you live in a fire-prone area, we really have to get serious about, how do we adapt? And it's a very hard thing to do, because after these massive fires like in LA, you have so many people that lost their homes.
Displaced.
We'll
yeah.
have to rebuild. And how do we rebuild, right? Do we enforce better codes so
Yes.
that it's safer, right?
Yes, I agree.
But the tendency is not. The tendency in the past has been to lack some of the requirements so people could rebuild faster. And so how do we deal with that? I go back to each community will have to kind of forge their kind of future with help from regional, state, and federal. But I think that's, I think we can look for more extreme events, and how do we get together as a society to really prepare and adapt to some of those things. Yeah.
And as humans, we all have the ability to change the things we do that
Absolutely.
create a footprint. Taking a look at everything you do in your life and how maybe one or two things, composting or something
Yeah.
different that you do can make a huge
Absolutely.
difference.
I think at a personal level, I really think the change that we need is at a systemic level, right?
Correct.
But there are things that we can do at a personal level, but I'm not a big fan of putting it's like the plastic pollution, right? The burden is put on the consumer, right?
Huge.
You don't recycle, and even when you do recycle, it ends up in the ocean or in the landfill, right? So I think that the systemic, but what we can do is, like, first of all, vote and promote the politicians that are aligned with your,
course.
yeah, and even across parties, right? If you're worried about hurricanes, and then just find that politician that's going to
Here in
act on it,
Florida,
right?
we are very worried about hurricanes.
Exactly. I
Yes.
see a lot of action at the city and level here in Florida. It's really inspiring, right?
It's escalating. They're
Yeah.
investigating different things. Yes.
The other thing that you can do, I think that because also we're adapting to this changing climate, but still it's never too late to reduce our emissions, right? And try to mitigate some of the climate.
Electric cars.
Yeah, you can electrify, one thing easy, maybe don't eat meat one day a week,
Right.
or reduce your meat intake a little bit, but that
It'll
makes
be
a
good for your
difference.
health, though.
It'll be good. And that's the other thing
Actually.
too, exercise, bike to work.
Yes.
So find things that are good for you and for the environment, and then
course.
maybe stick with them, and I think that'll be great.
This
Yeah.
is amazing. Thank you for being here. We thank you for bringing us this information, all of these different options of making changes that are impactful all the way around.
Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you for
me.
being here.
Yeah.
Thank you
Right.
for watching Naturalista, and we will see you next time. Stay tuned. Where are we headed next? See you next week.